Stuck inside my mind in this quarantine pause. The light at the end of the tunnel isn't in sight. Where do I go to find someone to talk to about all of my flaws? You can never validate me, tell me the lies. I searched mental health and found a therapist online. Said I'm anxious and depressed and my coping skills are not fine. We weren't a fit and it felt like a waste of time. I heard an interview and I felt an instant connection. I learned CBT, BBT, and mindfulness skills and each and every session. Now I'm pulling through, ready to ask the next question. The next question. The next question. The next question. The next question.
Hello and welcome to NextQuest podcast, where I ask your potential therapist questions so you don't have to. I am your host, Noah S. Garcia, licensed professional counselor supervisor. Today I welcome to the show Sean Sparks, licensed professional counselor, who will be discussing his practice in an area of specialty, poly, kink, and fetish relationships. Welcome to the show, Sean.
Hey Noah, how are you doing today?
I'm good. It's good to have you on. I've been excited about doing this recording.
Yeah, same. I've very much been looking forward to getting to just like talk again. So
Yeah, same here. So why don't we start with, what are your credentials and experience?
yeah, so I graduated from University of North Texas in 2014, Master's of Science in Counseling. I got my LPC in 2015, May of 2015, and I have been practicing free and clear since then as a fully licensed LPC. I don't currently have any other standing credentials apart from an NCC, as we all do.
Cool. So at your practice, is it Sean Sparks? Is it your name, or is there an umbrella name for it?
Sean Sparks Counseling.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm simple. Keep it straightforward.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
So at your practice, do you accept insurance? If so, which ones? If not, why not?
I do not. I use a private pay system with sliding scale. I find there's a lot of limitations and difficulties working with insurance, and I'm able to make my services available to more people who need them with a sliding scale system in place.
Can you tell us a little more about that sliding scale? Is there some sort of structure to it?
Sure. I have a base rate of $100 a session, and I slide up from 50 to 100. I do work flexibly with clients ongoing as well in the event of life circumstances that change. And as all counselors do, occasionally we do pro bono work as well.
Cool. Okay. Do you have weekend or evening appointments?
I work until, so my last session ends at 7 p.m. On weekdays. I don't do weekend appointments because I need that time for self-care.
Totally understood. Is being a therapist your first career? If not, what was?
I guess like career-wise, my first and longest career was being a DJ. I started that career in technically 1997. And I was working as a DJ. I was still picking up work as a DJ all the way up until like 2016 or 2017. Yeah. So that was what I was doing that helped support me while I was in school, in grad school, and working on my initial internship hours, which is kind of a slog at first. But I knew when I became a counselor, I would be transitioning out of being a DJ because DJ work means that you've got an ear pointed at, or a monitor pointed at your ear while you're having to like test the music, listen to the music that's pumping out into, the bar mitzvah or the wedding that you're playing the music for, right? Hearing
and late hours too, I'm sure.
Very late hours, very chaotic hours too. It's like you don't know what you're going to be booked for, and it's like taking a wedding example, we have a wedding from like 3 until midnight on Sunday, and we want you here 2 hours before and 2 hours after. And if I'm also running a counseling practice or trying to go to school for counseling, that means that I've got to break all the stuff down, immediately go to sleep, come back and wake up for my other responsibilities. So, but the biggest issue really was the hearing thing. It's just that is one of the most important organs in our work. Not necessarily including the ASL counselors who also work with different populations, but I just couldn't, in good conscience, do a job that was going to slowly be degrading my hearing while being a counselor.
Makes sense to me. What drew you to being a therapist?
Well, the subject matter of our discussion today, one of the, at least, I had a friend years ago, right after I had graduated from my bachelor's program with my first degree in sociology. And at the time, she was wanting to process some difficult issues in a polyamorous relationship that she was in. I had been in polyamorous relationships myself for about 3 years, maybe 4 years at this time. And so during the course of an evening and the next day, we just talked. And as we talked, she was able to kind of like come to some understandings that were helpful for her. And something that she shared with me, something that she reflected to me, was that she told me that I was a very good natural listener. And 2, she noted that there aren't many people in the world who are therapists that are polyamorous. There are many therapists who study polyamory and to get certified in different kinds of trainings regarding it, but that there are not many helpers out there who are clinically licensed that actually are coming to it from the lived experience. And I took what she said to heart because her name is Diana Adams, and she is a well-known family attorney has been practicing in New York, is not currently practicing in the States, but she was the vice president of the New York Polyamory Society for a while, and is considered kind of an important voice in different issues regarding polyamory. And so when she told me that, it carried this weight of it, this person who has this significance in the culture, kind of like just saying like, hey, you're pretty okay at this, like, and we kind of need people like you out there. And I was at that moment at like a very open-minded place because I had just gotten my degree. I was kind of trying to figure out what to do with a sociology degree in the very, very worst part of the recession. And so, I spent about a year thinking about it. And after a lot of consideration, I decided to go for it. And am still to this day extremely glad that I did, because I love this work. And I really like getting to synthesize something that feels like a native skill, which is just like talking with people and listening to people, and providing services for a community that I care about.
Yeah. I mean, I think lived experiences, you're talking to me. Mm-hmm. I'm a trans guy who works with trans folks. Mm-hmm. And that's what brought me, same kind of deal. That's what brought me to doing what I do. And I love it. And I don't think lived experience is valued as much as it should be within therapy communities, some therapy communities.
Yeah. It feels very meaningful in this one, for sure. I know that it is one of the key reasons people reach out to me when they are seeking services is, I don't know how many times I hear in the initial contact or a consult call, I just want to talk to somebody who I don't have to explain this to.
Same here. That's exactly what I get.
Yeah. And it's like, and I want to acknowledge there are therapists out there who do practice with the taught understanding, and they are providing a necessary service to the community too. And that is just as valuable. But something that people let me know that they're seeking is not like when they say something like, so I've been talking to Brad again recently. He's my satellite, and I just can immediately say, and I've been really wanting to talk to him for the last couple of months because I've been thinking about him a lot. They don't have to pause and go, I don't know if you know this from poly stuff, but a satellite is a partner who floats into your life and then floats back out, and right. You've got a secure understanding with them, and they don't have to do that. It's just innate, and so I think that feels comfortable, and is what one of the main draws that brings people in, wanting to seek services with me.
Well, tell us a little more about yourself. What are your hobbies, TV shows, music, etc.?
Okay. So, well, as I mentioned earlier, being a DJ, I love all kinds of music, except country music that's come out in the last 30 years. Sorry, country fans. But I wouldn't be a good DJ if I didn't say I have a line somewhere. But I love music, especially dance music, and that's still a hobby for me today. It's kind of like my art collage thing that I like to do on the back end. I don't do it as vigorously. I definitely don't have the time for it anymore, because when I was working, it was a huge time suck. I would spend dozens of hours a week, sometimes just digging through music, endlessly trying to find new stuff. And I don't have the time for that anymore. But I actually had a kind of difficult time the past couple of years, because as that waned, I didn't, when you live with a passion that is a kind of creative art thing that really gives you a sense of fire or some kind of spark, and for some reason it lapses, you're not doing it anymore, you can be in this period of deficit where you're struggling, right, with you want to express, you want to play, you want that feedback process that kind of comes with creative arts. And it took me a while, but and it was actually while I was working in a hospital setting, working with teenagers, that I found my new love, my thing that kind of filled in that space and has become my obsession now, because I, working 5 days a week in a PHP or IOP setting, as I know you're familiar, you're, especially working with adolescents, you have to be on every single day. You have to be creating
all day, every day.
Yeah, and it's we've got curriculum we're working from, but you're talking about 4 hours with these kids sometimes. you reach the limits. And so you have to get creative. You have to come up with new things that keep them engaged, that pull them back in. And it was when I found, I saw one of those meme things, and it was the character alignment charts that people do from the Dungeons and Dragons like tabletop system, right? But it was one of those memes where they take like your favorite characters from a sci-fi, and it's like, Captain Picard is lawful good, and Data is like neutral good, and like all this stuff, or neutral, I guess. Data's neutral good. But anyway, I was like, oh, okay, wait a second, this could be cool. And I created a printout of the alignment system, and I gave it to the kids, and I told them, take this home with you, review it, decide for yourself which one of these you are. Come back tomorrow, don't tell anybody. So we did this. And then when they got in, I basically did like a fishbowl structure with them. And I was like, all right, guys, what we're going to do is we're going to go around, and I want each of you to tell me what you think I am, what alignment I am. And so they did that. And I didn't give them any response. I just kind of like, okay. And for each one, they had to give a reason, what they had seen in my behaviors that told them that I was that alignment. And when it came all the way around, I was like, okay, big reveal, I am this alignment. And I instantly saw two things happen. One, the kids who really got it right, like they felt this like validation. They were like, cool, I understand Sean. And I actually kind of understand how to like think of people in a way, like in a values-based way. And then the second thing that happened was with each of the kids who didn't get it right, I kind of did a one-on-one with them. And I was like, what was up with that? Like, what made you think I was this instead of that? Like, tell me about, what you see in me. And sometimes the things they would go off of is like, well, you told us this story from like way back when you were a teenager. And I thought like maybe you were like more reckless and rebellious than you think of yourself now. It's like, oh, that makes perfect sense. Like, but they too, like in the parsing, are learning about values. And every time I did this exercise, they loved it. And they all came away feeling like they learned something deeper about themselves and the people in the group they were with. And it just made me think like, Dungeons and Dragons is really cool. It's got all sorts of mini games in there like this that can be exported into activities. Totally. Yeah. And so since then, for the past like 3 years, I have been slowly listening to Dungeons and Dragons podcasts, watching shows, reading books about it, starting to play games. And this has all been like very progressive. And now am currently DMing my first game. I'm on the 6th session this Saturday of DMing my first game. And I sent you that picture a little bit ago of my audio setup that I had made for this, but I don't know if you noticed, but the stack was that it was the boxes is all the indie books. And these are always just sitting here on my desk now. And so this is like my thing. It's my time suck now, is like creating worlds and working on building interesting story arcs for my characters. I have an end goal for it. That is going to come back into therapeutic work. And it's specifically trying to find those opportunities within a tabletop gaming system that can be exported into behaviorally practicing in vivo with clients, different kinds of self-regulation skills. Like one simple example, right? Like in Dungeons and Dragons, if you are a wizard and you cast a spell, certain kinds of spells require concentration, right? And if somebody hits your character, concentration gets broken if you don't pass a certain DC save. And so I had the thought like, well, what if a person could get advantage on that save, right? By regulating their heart rate within a certain BPM range. So we could use like BPM monitors and like heart rate BPM monitors. And by doing like diaphragmatic breathing, right, regulate their heart rate to within like a 80 to or like 70 to 90 range or something like that. And then they get advantage on that check. If they want to cast a spell that compels somebody to do something or tell the truth, for example, maybe they have to share a vulnerable truth first to have that spell work without the other person getting the opportunity to like save from it working on them. And so there's like lots of little plug and play opportunities there. Anyway, I've completely just nerded out very down the well with that. So I'll just wrap up the interest section with I also am obsessed with cats way too much.
Yes, that is one thing I do know about you.
Yes.
And your many kitties.
Mm-hmm.
So in your work with clients, what modalities do you draw upon? I mean, it sounds like you're very creative in your approach.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us a little more?
Sure. So, right out of the gate from grad school, I came away with a CBT core conceptualization structure. So that's my foundational level. It's I work from there conceptually with everybody. However, I embrace the fullness of the flexibility of CBT. And the nice thing about CBT is everything can be a technique if it's evidence-based, which includes reflective listening and humanistic skills. And so I initially kind of like worked to conceptualize client needs through that lens. And then collaboratively with clients, I build skill sets that are going to apply from there. What I tend to apply the most is CBT, humanistic narrative tools, and strengths-based, like solutions-focused kind of methodologies. In situations where client needs call for it, I also will bring in DBT because having worked in the IOP PHP setting for so long, I'm very familiar and comfortable using DBT tools.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Well, the title of today's episode and one of your specialties, poly, kink, and fetish relationships.
Mm-hmm.
I think, maybe the first thing to establish might be some terminology.
Great.
So what are some common terms that you could impart upon us that, most people wouldn't know?
Sure. So starting with kind of talking about polyamory, right, as a focus of like relationship work, for example, something that we've talked about very recently is the idea that polyamory is one form of open relationship style that falls under a much broader umbrella of just consensual or ethical non-monogamy, and something that in the literature more and more is being referred to as consensual non-monogamy. Within that umbrella, there are a variety of different kinds of relationship structures. I tend to advertise and cater to working with polyamorous relationships in that umbrella, but there are many other kinds of people who I have worked with who have different relationship structures. People who have open relationships, people who are swingers, people who are solo polyamorous, or even anarchopolyamorous. All of these different terms mean similar things in different ways. And I guess to kind of like flesh that out a little bit, polyamory in general just means people who are in a loving and attached relationship with more than one person. The contrast that has been provided with something like open relationships, for example, is that these people may have relationships with other people, but they may not be strongly attached relationships necessarily. They may do dating outside of a relationship. Inside of these structures are also different kinds of substructures. For example, in polyamory, people can be in different kinds of relationship structures. Like a lot of people only know polyamorous or open relationships from the context of one couple having a relationship outside of the couple, right? And we would call that, in the context of open relationships or consensual non-monogamy, a hierarchical relationship, and they have a primary-based hierarchical relationship. So we'll do like a cis setup here. A man and a woman are married. The woman has a boyfriend who she is seeing outside of the relationship. These two men and women may refer to each other as primary partners. And a primary partner means somebody who you share a symbolic link with, like we are married, got a ring on it. A logistical link with, we have a home together. And expanding that out into like systemically, like a familial link, like we've got children together. One of the criticisms of hierarchical relationships in polyamory is that it implies a less than status to people who are the other partners, right? Because they become called secondaries or tertiaries, and those names mean what they sound like, and it means like you get less. You get less power in the relationship. Essentially, you may not get a say in what kinds of activities you get to do with your partner if their primary partner has decided to say no, that can't happen. And so another kind of model within open relationships, polyamorous relationships that is common is non-hierarchical approaches like constellations or polycules, where partners, if they do have terms for each other, may use more specific names, like this partner is my nesting partner, implying that the specific responsibility we share together is we have a home together, but that doesn't make other people who are dating me less than in other ways. They still have the right to have an equal status as a partner.
So you use the term polycule. Can you further define that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I actually heard a differentiation on this recently that I really liked because, I'll get into that in a second. But a polycule is essentially just the interconnected links of people who are dating each other. Brad is dating Gina, who is dating Travis, and David is dating Dana and Michael is dating, etc. Like it's the linking of people who are considered partners by everybody, with everybody in the relationship. Now, that doesn't mean that they're dating everybody. It just means that they have a status as partner with somebody who has status as partner with somebody who has status as partner. Now, polycules can get complicated because your partners and metamors, which metamors are the person who's dating your partner.
I love that term.
Yeah,
I just love it.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, metamors being the people who it's like are dating your partner. They may not all get along with each other. They may have differences of personality or opinion on things that make it to where they don't feel this homogenized polycule term fits. And so I recently saw polyconstellation as an alternative for that, and I really like that. Yeah,
I like that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Because it allows for people to have their interconnected networks, but maybe they're not all perfectly connected to each other, but they are in the same sky, right?
It reminds me of, I don't know that you'd have any reason to watch this, but did you ever watch The L Word?
I didn't. Yeah.
So this was in my baby days years ago, mm-hmm. before I came out as anything. On the show, they basically keep a chart of who has dated who historically, and it's this huge chart that mm-hmm. grows and grows and grows as the show goes on. And I just had a flash to that when you were explaining that.
Yeah, that is a that's been a party activity I've participated in before on a refrigerator with some markers.
What is it? 6 degrees of separation? I'm sure it's less in the poly community.
Sure, yeah, probably 1 to 3 would be the range at any mutual gathering.
So for people who don't really or have a hard time grasping polyamory, I think a lot of people get it confused with polygamy.
Oh yeah.
So how do you differentiate the two? How would you define, polygamy versus polyamory?
Yeah. So one pretty easy differentiation is that polygamy tends to mean marriage, and another culturally important fact is polygamy has tended to be related to specific religions or specific cultures within certain areas or nations, and an issue that comes up with certain kinds of polygamy is that it is culturally enforced in some of the places that it's occurred. So polygamy means the right or privilege to marry more than one person. Polyamory means loving more than one person. It literally translates to that in a badly smashed together word salad, poly and amorous being from Greek and Latin roots. Everybody has a fun joke about that at some point.
Okay, so that's a little bit about polyamory. What about kinks and fetishes? And we'll revisit polyamory shortly. But how would you define a kink? How would you define a fetish? And how do the two differ?
Kink is often like an umbrella term for the majority of the different kinds of alternative sexual practices that the stuff we call not vanilla, right? Fetishes tend to refer to more specific practices within kink. Fetishes can be things like rope bondage, for example. This also falls under kink, but fetish more directly implies that. So
and like leather too would be
correct. Yeah.
Fetish.
Yeah. And we could list these things off all day, but
yeah. Okay. In terms of kinks, let's talk about consent, negotiation, and contracts.
Okay.
What are your experiences and thoughts on those things?
Well, they're all very important, and from a therapist perspective, I'm going to say consent is absolutely necessary in kink and fetish settings. Contracts I strongly encourage, and have definitely provided materials for people or helped them create like flesh out their own contracts before. Because one of the things that people struggle with in any realm of their life is assertiveness, and communicating on the fly about things that are important and involve your bodily autonomy can sometimes be compromised by the intensity of a situation. And this is an area of intimacy, of sexual and emotional interaction that people can have difficulty expressing what it is they are okay with and not okay with, especially if they're in an exploratory phase at that point in time. And so I really strongly encourage people to create contracts. And what contracts are really doing is they are listing out ahead of time what the person is consenting to be okay with in an interaction, which is called a scene in those settings. what they're not okay with, and also what they are okay with possibly being introduced to or exploring into, with the condition that there is some sort of precautionary measure in place that allows them to stop or warn if things are becoming uncomfortable for them, usually referred to as a safe word.
Mm-hmm. So that would be very handy then in like a scene that involves like non-consent, for example.
Right, which is something that people do role play with, and has and needs to be treated very, very, very carefully. Definitely something that, like, if people are going to use non-consent in a scene, a contract really should be in place. It's something that is going to protect the rights and the safety of everybody involved, and on both sides. Both the people who may be acting in a submissive role in the scene and the people who may be acting in a dominant role.
This is very interesting stuff.
Mm-hmm.
What advice do you have for folks who are, in maybe a negotiation stage of some sort of relationship dynamic?
Know your rights. There is there is a I guess older piece of material out there now, and this specifically chains back into polyamory. That's called the Secondary Bill of Rights, and it was a rebuttal specifically to the issues that people were having with the hierarchical structure of primary-based relationships. And it was simply asserting that as a partner, like, I deserve to have equal considerations in certain issues. And if those aren't there, I need to be told directly that they're not, and I need to agree to it. I need to be consenting to every point of access that I have in the relationship, and I need to be consenting to every limitation that exists in the relationship, rather than it just being imposed on me by the dictates of a primary partner. Because that is, I mean, it means, like, when that happens, it means you've entered into a governing structure that you didn't realize you were going into, that you didn't realize was going to be limiting how you can love, how you can feel, how you can act, how somebody else can act towards you or with you. I think that comports with kink and fetish as well, like fetishes as well, is like knowing your rights is really important. If you're entering into a scene with somebody in a submissive role, understanding that you have the right to set limits on what's going to happen, that if you are feeling coerced in some way, you have the right to communicate that and to stop it. Like I said earlier, assertiveness issues creep into every aspect of our lives. And we see people, as therapists, we see people struggle to be assertive in their workplaces, in like contentious friendships, in their homes with roommates, and it happens in our intimate relationships as well. And so it's really important to know how to be assertive when you need to and communicate these things, but also know when you're going to struggle with it and how you can act ahead of time by using things like contracts or like information that's available online to help yourself with being assertive.
And, you described it as a right. I think it's totally a right, but more importantly, I think it's a responsibility. To do those things, to say you're not okay with something when you're not okay with something, because I think as adults, that's something that we expect from one another, right? Like, if you weren't okay with something, then I'd expect, you to tell me. So I like to think of it as more of a responsibility.
Right. And that is why, like in the counseling work that I do with people, education is a big, like the education is always a component of our work. Education is a really big part of this work, because there is, like you heard me dipping very, very briefly into just the interconnected like systems of consensual non-monogamy and some of the like different relational structures within that. And that's just that was just a dip. Like I could have talked within that for another like 15 minutes and I wouldn't have hit everything. And so, yeah, like letting people know that they do need to be communicating with people about what it is they are okay with and they're not okay with, and taking it upon themselves to like learn what that is and find ways to talk about it.
Last week's episode, I recorded with Anya Mirasol on healing complex trauma and chronic shame through sex and BDSM. And, I think this is where that would come into play is, somebody who traditionally, because of trauma, codependency, whatever the case may be, has difficulty doing that. But in working with somebody in therapy, developing those skills and empowering that person to be able to, enact that responsibility, I think is really important.
Yes, because setting boundaries is important. Like setting boundaries in those situations is kind of critical. And people do really wander into these forms of lifestyle exploration without much context or knowledge initially. Sometimes because a new partner brings them in. And while there is a lot of written material out there, they're not necessarily going off of that. They may just be going off of what they're told. And that can lead people into dangerous situations, especially if it is somebody who is trying to work through possible past trauma, right? And maybe they're just trusting somebody to like do right by them.
Yeah, I think that's where, as therapists, that becomes our obligation and responsibility is to teach those things.
Yeah, to say when things are not okay, and and how to protect those boundaries, how to like own those responsibilities.
So you mentioned you could talk more about structure and nature of poly relationships. Why don't you give us some more information about other types of structures there are?
Sure. So like I mentioned earlier, there's swingers is an easy one, right? Most people, I won't say most people, but many people have a context for what swingers are. And swingers are people who are in a loving and attached relationship with one person. Tends to most often be the case, and then they have sexual relationships with other people, and they have a limit on attachment. They disallow emotional attachment from dominating the primary relationship, and so they can go out and date as long as the dating is about hooking up. And problems sometimes come up if these relationships bleed into the realm of emotions. Now, some people who are swingers do end up like opening themselves up to emotional relationships, and then they transition into like a more attached kind of relationship, as for example, a polyamorous relationship. Solo polyamory is when a person is essentially their own primary partner. It's like the easiest way to put that is when the person says like, me first, I am my own loving attachment. And that does mean that they can introduce boundaries and limits with other partners that may disallow them from having as strong of an attached connection, or may create barriers to that. Anarchopoly is often thought of as like the honey badger of polyamorous relationships. People who are anarchopoly, it's like solo polyamory goes like one deeper, and it's literally cribbing the philosophy of like anarchism and applying it to through a polyamorous lens. Yeah.
Give me a little more information about what does that look like in practice?
Mm-hmm. So in Anarchopoly, well, I'll talk about solo poly first because it's easier. In solo polyamory, people are possibly like dating somebody in a polycule, but viewing themselves as not part of that polycule. So they don't necessarily see themselves as interconnected with everybody else in the web. And that may be like a differentiation point that they make. People in anarchopoly, they can tend more towards kinds of like comet or satellite relationships where they enjoy having secure connection with people, but not necessarily secure attached connection. And so they may have potentially like a multitude of relationships with people who they see once a month or every like few weeks or something. But part of the deal is with anarchopoly is that there are no promises there. There are no like expectations that are implied with the relational structure.
Got it. Okay. Very interesting stuff. What about for our more vanilla listeners? Let's talk about some more examples of kinks and fetishes.
Mm-hmm. How much time you got?
I know there's so many. I know
there are so many. So I guess like one place to start is just understanding that not all kinks or fetishes are sexual, because the greater dynamic is the exchange of power and control that is occurring in a scene between two people. And so sometimes these things are sexual, sometimes they are not at all. And people who negotiate having these scenes with one another may not have a relationship outside of a specific scene that they negotiate. For example, somebody who maybe someone who struggles with feeling like they have to be in control of everything in their life, and they're like spinning a dozen plates every day, desperately yearns to just spend like an hour or two not in control of anything, and specifically having that power taken away from them, having somebody else put them in some kind of a situation where they don't have any power at all, apart from the negotiated limits that we've discussed previously, right? But so maybe they would negotiate something like, I would like to be tied up, and then I would like to be like physically abraded or physically struck in these specific ways, and in these like specific rhythms. And so maybe
with these specific implements,
exactly. So maybe like somebody would negotiate like being tied up and flogged, for example. And with the Dom, who is the other half of that scene, they may even already have an understanding of, I'd like this to happen until I actually cry. Because they want to connect with the release. They want to find a cathartic moment. They want to get past that precipice where that part of them subconsciously keeps trying to hold on to the control, keeps trying to kind of reassert itself because it's so ingrained in them, and they want to get pushed over that edge just right past where they can reach for control anymore, and they have to surrender. They have to kind of say, okay, I don't have control anymore. And when that happens, people often hit like a breaking point, a kind of catharsis or cathexis that like allows them to be vulnerable in ways they may not even be able to be vulnerable in the outside world. and so they may have like, they may tell somebody like, I want this to happen until I cry. I want this to happen until I cry, and I want you to continue on like for another couple of minutes. They may negotiate something to that end.
Gotcha. And so my understanding of the difference between a kink and a fetish is that a fetish like requires that specific thing in order to achieve sexual arousal.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that can include that. I mean, that could be really anything,
Yeah. Yes, it could be, I want somebody to touch me with their bare feet. Or I require the presence of this particular image in a situation where these things are happening to me, to really like let go and actually feel compelled to reach that precipice and move across it.
I saw a documentary a while back on, I think it's Objectophilia.
Mm-hmm.
It was this documentary about this woman who like married the Eiffel Tower and like would go visit the Eiffel Tower and just have a very sexually arousing experience in doing so. It was just so interesting.
Yeah. And it is interesting because, Rule 34, like, if you can think of it, somebody may find that thing activating in a specific way, like Kleenex boxes or cars. Yeah. So it's a little, it's fascinating because like people may be having all sorts of charged experiences around us based on their response to certain objects or iconography that we don't know about or understand.
What would you say, in your experience, are some unique issues faced by polyamorous folks and people who practice kinks and have fetishes?
Well, one of the ones that I was just thinking about last night, because I saw there's a show on Netflix, I think, that's about kink culture. That's a fiction, but this was something I was thinking about as I saw it, because I wasn't watching it. I just kind of walked past one of my housemates watching it, is that it used to be the case that they didn't see themselves in the world. It used to be the case that they weren't really present in popular media. And if they were, it was a demonizing kind of portrayal. That has shifted pretty significantly in the last decade, I'd say. More and more we see, portrayals of people, dating somebody outside of the relationship, and the relationship that they're emerging from doesn't end. Thruples being established is just like a naturalistic occurrence between people that doesn't end. What's the director? He's a European director. He does the movies where the one of his typical setups is like this person are seeing each other, and then they find this person, and then they're.
I think I know who you're talking about. I can't remember.
Is that Bertolucci?
You may be right there.
Yeah. But like the hook with those is always, and it ends badly. It's like beautiful and wonderful, and then it ends like really messed up. But like that's not the case in some of the stuff we're seeing coming out now. One of my favorite TV shows is The Expanse, and something that they have done in this most recent season is having characters who are in an actively polyamorous situation, and it's not the focus of the story at all. It's just the backsetting, just like people being in any relationship would be. It's very normalized. So it's not even, it's gone beyond demonized, and it's gone beyond fetishized to a normalized thing that is just part of a normal narrative. so that's definitely one thing is like, it used to be an issue, and it still is to some degree, but it's decreasing. One one that's very salient is the pandemic. For people in polyamorous relationships and people in kink communities, the pandemic has basically been a wipeout for accessing intimate experiences with others in the ways that they had become comfortable with. Because now everyone has to be considerate of your vector trails, basically. Your the different who you saw yesterday, who you have seen in the last 2 weeks, how close
your
you were
roommates are.
Who your roommates are, right? And so
who they're dating.
Yeah, exactly. And so and that's the thing is like increasingly in the United States now is people do live with people just as housemates or roommates more often because it's a lot harder to afford having your own place than it used to be. And so if you're a polyamorous person who lives in a house full of roommates and you don't live with any of your partners, and maybe your partners live with other people, and you have more than one partner, you're talking about having to negotiate a COVID bubble with maybe a dozen people just to maintain your relationships or more. The COVID bubble that I'm in is 5 households, I think, and it took like 3 months of negotiations to ascertain like how we were going to qualify the households that were in it, and like what the conditions were going to be for allowing other people in or not. And now this weekend, actually, I have a scheduled discussion with my own house about the advent of vaccines and the knowledge of at least limited immunity from being previously infected. And we have to kind of like explore for our household how, like, what's everybody's comfort level with people who are vaccinated or recently infected and they're now immune for a short period of time at least, being around other people. Like, do they still need to maintain all precautions? Can people start to go to other people's houses if they use masks still? It's this extensive dialogue, and it's going to, and I have to check in with my house first, because then we have to communicate with the other households in the bubble, so that my partner and her partner and his other partner can then talk to the other households that they're connected to. And our situation is, I mean, like, not atypical. Like I'm only connecting with one other household, but they are connecting because of their relationships, connecting with a couple other households. And so some, polycules or polyconstellations may have to do things where they're including like a dozen households. That's a lot of vectors when you consider that people are going out into the world. They have to go get groceries. They have to go to jobs, some of them. And so it's just, it's a lot of risk and a lot of risk management that people, that specifically people in polyamorous relationships and kink culture are having to deal with. And kink culture is kind of the same thing with a different flavor on it. It's, if you were in the habit of meeting with somebody once a week or once a month to have a specific kind of scene, now you have to talk about like who, just the same things I mentioned before, like where these people have been, and with your own households about like, is this okay? Because this is one of the problems is our households have the potential to become gatekeepers to our intimacy now. People have to do this, like many people are having to do this really uncomfortable thing of weighing the logistics of the safety of their home versus the security of their intimate life. And that sucks. It sucks for so many people.
Yeah, I mean, that's awful. You have, because, I mean, for a lot of people, partners are also a source of support, and I think that's very difficult. And I mean, it sounds like, that's a very unique issue going on right now. What about some other common things you see clinically? Like, it sounds like working on assertiveness and conflict management and just kind of communication skills in general is very useful. What other sorts of common things do you work with folks on?
Sure. So other kinds of issues include things like adjusting to the changing expectations that occur if, for example, say a couple has discussed one or both of their desires to open up their relationship. This can be something that is both exciting and terrifying for them. Or one for one and one for the other. And so they may have differing expectations about how that's going to play out. Something that both of them may get sideswiped by, completely surprised by, is how they feel about the change in accessibility to their partner as their partner starts to become open-hearted with somebody else and develop attachments with someone else. They, have to adjust their expectations around things like accessibility, like time-wise. Like they may have like a kind of traumatized reaction to realizing that they have to start to schedule their time with their partner and confront a kind of fusion that they had with them, a kind of almost codependent nature that they had in the relationship that they had enjoyed the privilege of. And now that privilege is going away for them. One that I was reading about very recently that was really interesting was, because you don't hear about this very often, was the potential traumatized reaction of cis white men who become polyamorous. And it's specifically because of the act of coming out as polyamorous can mean giving up privilege in a way. They may have enjoyed the ability to be very romantically and sexually available previously when maybe they were like a serial monogamist or something. But by coming out as polyamorous and saying like, this is my relationship modality now, that is exclusionary in a way. You will tell that to people when they're talking about dating and they'll be like, nope. That's not for me. I even respectfully, like, just like, nope, that's cool for you, but that's not for me. And so one of the things in this article is just talking about how like guys may be kind of like white male guys may actually have like a really difficult emotional reaction to giving up that kind of privilege. And
well, I mean, also, a lot of cis het people, especially cis men, think of their relationship as something that is like they own, like that is theirs. And I imagine that is difficult as well.
Yeah, because they're now entering into a terrain where every person is basically their own nation state that will be actively negotiating like attachments, boundaries, expectations. And that's the biggest thing that you'll hear again and again and again with polyamory is that to thrive in it, you have to be willing to practice communicating and learn more about communicating than you already know. You may be great at it. There's probably still more you can learn. And getting comfortable with difficult conversations, because those will have to come up from time to time. Hopefully it's not all the time for you, but it's definitely going to occur more frequently than possibly in a monogamous relationship where a lot of people kind of go on autopilot and have a lot of assumptions that they let the structure guide for them. We're together now, and they may not even say, and that means to me you're not dating other people, you're not flirting with other people. And, I'm sure having worked with people in relationships, that there's lots of like people just like kind of run into these surprises where they're like, I didn't know that meant I couldn't have male friends anymore, for example. So, yeah.
What, a lot of times people will choose to try and open up their relationships when the relationship is already struggling. What has been your experience in working with folks who are going through that?
When that is the case, for therapists who are working with people who are bringing that up in session, hazard warning here, right? Like little orange flags should be going up for you. Opening up a relationship should not be a nuclear option to saving the relationship, because it's not going to make issues go away. It's going to create myriad new issues that are going to call for even more strength in the relationship than there was before. Like I said a second ago, difficult conversations are going to be happening about all sorts of things that you never would have expected to be an issue. And if you are already struggling, it's just going to exacerbate whatever kind of ruptured or difficult attachment you have with your partner.
Another thing that I've seen frequently is a lot of shame. Specifically with people who have certain kinks or fetishes.
Yes.
Can you speak a little to that?
Yeah. We come into our autonomous adult lives with stories that come from our different narratives in our upbringing. And those narratives say things about what a good person should be and what a good person should not be. And many of those things are villainized, and people who have certain relationship styles, people who have certain kinks or fetishes, they may be bearing a lot of shame because they grew up with this secret understanding of like, I like this, I feel drawn to this, I desire this, and XYZ says it's wrong, and that can be anything. It can be parents, teachers, religious organizations, other kinds of like youth organizations, that they all have their own different kinds of stories about what people should be. And when people have that, it makes it really hard for them to reach out for therapeutic advice, for therapy services, because something that they struggle with is, if I get in the room with someone, maybe I'm just putting myself in a situation where I'm going to be judged for an hour. Maybe I'm sitting down in front of somebody who is going to tell me that I'm broken as a person, because therapists as authority figures have a significant amount of power in people's minds. Now, we know that therapists are taught to be like non-judgmental, to be multicultural and open to diverse experiences. But that's not necessarily people's experiences every time they do sit down in a room or initiate contact with someone. And so one of the things that I really advocate for with therapists is just to kind of uphold those values, even if you recognize that like somebody has stuff going on that makes you feel uncomfortable. Refer them out in a very neutral way. Don't tell them how you feel about whatever it is that you disagree with. Allow them to come and go in peace, right? And find somebody who will support them, because we want them to be getting help. We want them to be seeking support, and we don't want them to be fearing going in these circumstances, because maybe if I tell this therapist that I have this specific kink, and they also know I have children, that's going to compromise the safety of my family because I'm giving up this vulnerable knowledge. We should be protecting clients in those circumstances.
Agreed.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What would you say are some common misconceptions about people in the poly, kink, and or fetish community?
Everybody's hooking up with each other. Seriously though. Yeah, like I talked about this with the kink thing. An assumption a lot of people have is that kink is always sexual, and it very often is not. And I even, I have worked with people who were in polyamorous relationships with partners who they're like sexual with and romantic with, and then they have a person who they have a kink relationship with that is outside of their polyamorous, like Polycule, polyconstellation, whatever, because it is non-sexual, non-romantic. It is a specific kind of emotionally vulnerable experience that they are seeking for one outcome and one outcome only. Now, that's not to say that kink can't be sexual, kink can't be romantic. It can, and it often is. But the assumption people should not have is that like one necessarily equates to the other. Same thing with polyamory. They're not all dating each other, man. they're not everybody. So, we were talking about like the term metamor before, and a metamor is the partner of my partner who I am not dating, right? The partner of my partner who I'm not dating, my metamor, is one of my best friends. He's a really amazing person who I have a lot of respect for. Negotiating like our friendship throughout the course of my romantic relationship with his partner has been a very interesting experience with all sorts of like growing awarenesses for both of us. And it's not like me being friends with him is not necessarily always the case for people. But he and I do not have a romantic relationship. And additionally, like people who are like metamors to one another because they share a partner aren't necessarily even friendly all the time. And sometimes there are different like modalities of polyamory that like either encourage or discourage people having closeness within those connections. Kitchen table poly is a popular term that people use for when the modality is if we are all dating as partners, it means that we need to be able to have enough good rapport with one another to sit at a kitchen table together and talk about the things coming up in our relationships like we are a family, essentially. But that's not a default, and it's not necessarily a mandate. Some people have a very closed off, like interconnectedness with their partners. It's like they have this partner and they have this partner, and never the twain shall meet. They know of each other, and there is consent that those relationships are happening, and information is being shared about like sexual health and all the other pertinent facts. But those two people don't necessarily have any connection with each other.
Gotcha. Okay. So shifting our focus a little bit more to you as a therapist, what kind of experience do you have working with particularly vulnerable clients, such as those who are transgender, undocumented, or BIPOC, to name a few examples?
So most predominantly my experience in that regard is with transgendered populations. I definitely have clients that are BIPOC, I'm fairly confident that I haven't worked with anybody who is undocumented. I do my very best with any of those communities to prioritize education, both in a global sense and a personal one. Because what I know about a vulnerable population doesn't necessarily translate to your experience as a member of a vulnerable population. And so one of the key things there is like, you don't go in with assumptions, but you do hold in context your cultural understanding, your cultural awareness, and, get curious with people, and prompting intermittently to just see if there are experiences that they hold being a part of that population that play into their day-to-day lived experiences. Some people will tell you very, very quickly, being vulnerable in this way in society is an everyday stressor for me. And a lot of what I work with them on is going to be those kinds of experiences. Learning how to, balance the need for emotional self-regulation and emotional self-soothing with the need for assertive communication and like expressions of identity, right? Because all of those things are important. But, especially when your day-to-day life feels like it's a stressor just because of the world. Feeling unsafe because of who you are is an ongoing traumatic experience. And so it's definitely important to call that into session now and again and just be checking in with people about how it's relevant for them. But again, not making assumptions and not trying to project onto them, people in your population struggle with this thing, so tell me about how that thing sucks for you, right? Mm-hmm.
What could a new client expect from an initial session with you, and what about on an ongoing basis?
Mm-hmm. So initial session, very much the getting to know you phase, and definitely the more rigid part of the process, of course, because we're having to cover a lot of ground initially, meaning, getting through our demographic information, getting through some amount of background and lived experience, and also just issues and concerns that are coming up in day-to-day life. I do make it a priority, and I know not all therapists do this, but this is, a preference thing, but I do make it a priority to try to do some issue-based work in the first session. And like I said, I realize that that's a preference because some therapists do treat first sessions as just intake, just information gathering only. Only because I know that when people go to therapy, they're coming into session with a lot of charged emotions and often a lot of hope that, like, I really hope that this helps somehow. And so I do try to make it a priority to, if necessary, expand the information gathering out into the second or third session with somebody and get into at least a small percentage of working period with them. And then in continued work, kind of like checking in as we work through these milestones and identifying when we have met a goal or an objective, and assessing whether that thing needs to continue to be worked on or whether we should set it to the side. Regularly checking to see how often meeting is still beneficial. I try to be as collaborative working with people as possible and focus on what is helpful for them rather than a strict regimented structure guided by a modality. Because sometimes a client has just done a very intense amount of self-work and has met one or a couple of their goals in a very short amount of time. And there's still more to do. They're not done yet, but they would like to shift to meeting every couple of weeks or every month, and like, you know, going to essentially what is considered like a check-in basis. But it's not necessarily because they feel done. It's because they need to come up for air, right? And they need to live their life a little bit with the new changes applied before they kind of come back in and start doing more work again. So yeah, but yeah, just kind of continually checking in about like how well are we continuing to meet the goals that you want to meet, and understanding like how we can be flexible around that.
Cool. How would you say your clients would describe or experience you?
So I don't want to say this to imply to people that that I am just a regular send-up goofball. But I am, you know, a feedback I often get is that I have a bright and inviting kind of tone or mood with people. And I'm very comfortable bringing humor and silliness into sessions. Obviously, things of deeper or more intense emotional nature are responded to in appropriate fashions, but I have seen the healing power of finding ways to have some amount of joy or humor in situations. It's that thing that Gottman talks about, where, because, you know, if you've worked with some clients long enough, there are some issues that they have that are workable, and they are making change towards. And then there are some that you keep coming back to again and again, and you process it and you look for new approaches, and they want to keep hacking away at it. And when doing that, having a brighter tone, having an uplifted mood, an ability to like bring levity in those circumstances is something that helps them to set the tone for themselves, that like there are going to be some harder problems in life that we aren't just going to be able to figure out immediately, and we're going to have to adjust and try again. And the more joyous we can be as we do that, smiling to ourselves and saying, here I am again, right? The stronger we are in each attempt we make until we start to see the change that we want to with that goal.
Are you a therapist who will laugh or cry with their clients?
Oh yeah, 100%. On both ends, very much so. I do always try, especially with crying, I do try to be considerate of who's holding is it conch? Yeah. Who's holding the space, right? I definitely try to maintain vigilance that my own vulnerability or tearfulness doesn't overshadow theirs, because that's part of the collaborative dynamic that we share with our clients, that I'm crying with you, not over you.
Right. How do you define holding space for someone?
Literally existing with them. Working with adolescents for several years really helped me grow in what holding space means. Because adolescent clients will bring anything into the room. Eagerness to work, eagerness to play, paranoia, suspicion, outright opposition, stonewalling, even like aggravated or kind of like violent energies. And one of the things that that meditation has really helped me to become grounded in is being with somebody, I am seeing you with my eyes, I am hearing you with my ears, but that doesn't necessarily mean that either of us has to say anything. So too with grieving clients. One of the things that we talk about with grief often is, because somebody is struggling or suffering in their grief doesn't necessarily mean that they want you to, or that you should rescue them. And because grief is something that needs to be experienced in order for people to move through it. And so holding space in that circumstance is sometimes having the strength internally to be in the presence of the rawness, the fullness of somebody processing really intense and difficult things. And that part of you inside just screaming like, I want to tell them it's okay. I want to say, you're fine. It's cool. And quelling that and self-regulating using, like, again, things that I have like grown in my own meditative practices, and staying in that moment with them while not responding, not interfering.
Love it. I love that question. I think it might be my favorite. What is the best advice you've ever received from a supervisor?
Probably from a therapist who I worked with in the hospital setting.
I already know who you're talking about.
Yeah. When I shared about fears that I had about meeting with clients in group settings that had dimensions of presentation that I hadn't seen before and that might overwhelm me or be intimidating. Or people who were suicidal in that place of desperation, again, where you want to rescue them. She told me to not be scared, because at the end of the day, even if I don't have the exact right reflection, even if I don't have the exact right tool to bring to bear in that moment, by merely existing in the presence with this person, by just being in the room with them and holding that space like we were just talking about, and by being willing to exist in their vulnerable state with them, we are helping. We are doing something that makes a difference in their world, because at least they're not alone. And the moment will come back around. If it comes up once and it matters and it's important, it's going to come around again. And you're going to get another chance to work through that thing, to process through that issue with them. It was an incredibly freeing and empowering thing to hear from somebody who, even just meeting her early on, I was already seeing like feeling a lot of respect and seeing that like this was a therapist who walks the walk.
Sup, KB?
Yeah, I'm talking around her because I don't know if it's okay to say her name. But yeah,
you can say her name. I don't have a problem. I don't think she would care either.
Yeah, Katie was definitely a huge influence on me as a counselor, and helped me to feel a lot stronger in a working world, in PHP IOP setting where we're always working with one ear to the hall, right? Like always like hyper vigilant as we're working of like circumstances changing very suddenly in any of the rooms, and so like in that space, like it was when I first entered into PHP IOP setting, I was very intimidated, and by getting to shadow with her and getting to work with her, and then having her give me that feedback, it really strengthened me as a therapist, and I am very grateful to her for that.
She's definitely a top-notch clinician, that's for damn sure. What have you personally learned about yourself and or the world through your practice?
Oh, that one's actually easy. That I'm way better with kids than I thought. I got into this work thinking my focus was going to be working with adults, specifically in relationship circumstances. And and they tell you this when you get into grad school, like you come into this with thinking that one thing is the thing that you're into and that you're going to do. And you may find out that you're actually better at something or just as good at something else and be surprised by that. And I was very surprised by how well I worked with children and adolescents. And it was because when I went into working into the IOP PHP setting, I actually thought that I had been hired to work with adults. And then it turned out that they needed somebody for the adolescent groups. And it was like, well, if you want this work, here it is. But it is this. And I never thought of myself as somebody who really got along with adolescents very well. And it ended up being the case that I had a really appropriate way of being for working with them. And to this day, I'm still very proud of the work that I did working with adolescents in that setting. And it did teach me that I've got a kid at heart kind of nature that really vibes with them. Yeah.
I mean, that's why you and I get along.
Yes. we're kind of silly, and that's okay.
Yeah, I think it's the best way to be. I couldn't imagine taking myself too seriously. Yeah. So back to you. What do you do to take care of yourself?
I am a very physical person when it comes to self-care. So I meditate a lot as just one form of self-care, but more so I go on a walk every day, sometimes multiple times a day. I exercise most days of the week. I do yoga most days of the week. And something I'm comfortable sharing about is like my own thing that I've struggled with in the past has been like sadness or depression in earlier periods of my life. And one of the things that we know from research is that one of the most effective interventions for that is changing your environment and moving around physically, right? And I had to teach myself that very on as a form of self-care to cope with my own periods of difficult mood, right? Periods of lower mood. And so, as we're talking right now today, and it's like going to get into the 20s tonight, I think. And we're in the middle of this northerner that's coming in. And yesterday, yesterday I saw the weather was starting to get gray, and I poked my head out and I was like, oh, it's cold. Okay. I got to go get my walk in. And so I bundle because it's it's going to get down into the teens this weekend. And so it's I got to make sure I gas up on all of the physical movement that I can. Because that is very much what nurtures me. The thing that's been hard about the pandemic is my other big outlet was going camping, going on vacations, going on camping trips. And I like to go big about it. I like to take 2 weeks off or something and go get out of the world, unplug your phone, really completely disconnect from the normal rhythms of things. And that's not happened this past year. So it's been a lot more walking. I now live in the cyberpunk dystopia I always fantasized about when I was a teenager, because I have one of those really cool workout mirror things. It was gifted to me.
Home mirror things?
Yeah. It was gifted to me by a group of friends who all chipped in as a gift, and it's awesome. like a really amazing gift for a person who does rely on physical movement as their self-care so much. And I love that thing so much that I think it's a great thing for people to get for themselves if they are the kind of person where they like gyms and they feel frustrated because they can't go to a gym this year. Yeah.
That's good to know. I had wondered about that thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. My favorite class on it is Tai Chi because some days I'm so tired, I'm so dogged by the end of the working day that like, I don't have it in me to do like a whole bunch of push-ups or sit-ups. And this mirror has Tai Chi classes. And so I can just sit there and I can pretend I'm holding a jar as I flow my hands across in front of me. And it's fun.
Sounds relaxing.
It's incredibly, yeah.
How would you define happiness?
That's hard. Because it's something that I parse a lot with people who are in different points of depression. And, it translates differently depending on where they're at. Happiness is sometimes like the ability to just like feel joyous or bright. Sometimes it is the sense of satisfaction we get from doing something that is engaged with our meaning or our values or what we call our purpose. I think if I'm talking about personally, happiness is something that I am invested in that has gravity for me, that pulls me along, that makes me wake up and feel excited. And because I'm a curious person and I like to learn, that tends to be learning about new things. That tends to be investigating things. That, like in the past year has tended to be like really filling my head with Dungeons and Dragons lore, right? And so I wouldn't necessarily project that value onto others, but it is the one that clicks for me. Yeah.
Okay. What is the most embarrassing moment you have had as a clinician?
Misgendering. That's and that's a really vulnerable moment for both of us when it's happened. It's only happened once, and it's like when it happened, because I know why it happened, because I have a default where I'll call people sir, and I actually call my partners sir, and both of my partners are women, and so it's kind of a playful thing that I'll say. And working with somebody who in sessions is male presenting but isn't always male presenting in the world, I initiated a session once where very just like on the cuff, like, how are you today, sir? And they didn't react at all. And I like, and I feel grateful, like, to them for being patient with me, as I apologized and I said, I'm so sorry, friend. Right. Like, but it was a very embarrassing moment for me, because I know how sensitive that can feel for someone, how vulnerable that can feel. But it was a good teaching moment, because it reminded me that we can get into kind of a casual headspace sometimes when we're just like initiating a session with somebody, and to be like always just kind of like set the space and the tone of my mind and like remember to be considerate and be considerate of like who I'm meeting next.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you acknowledged it, which I think is the right thing to do in those situations. Sometimes people just try and, move past it, but, that's definitely something that needs to be acknowledged because that could impact the therapeutic relationship significantly.
Absolutely.
So I'm glad that you acknowledged it and corrected it, then
Mm-hmm.
we're able to proceed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that sucks.
Yeah. Like I said, definitely the most embarrassing thing.
It's refreshing to hear somebody say that. You as a cis guy,
Mm-hmm.
it's really refreshing to hear that was an embarrassing moment.
Yeah.
in a weird way. Because as a trans person, we always feel like the ones who are embarrassed in that moment,
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not always is a strong qualifier, but.
Yeah, but I mean, if anything, that should fall to me. I know I have made a connection with this person. I hold them in a vulnerable space. And so that's definitely on me. So yeah, it is, like I said, I felt very grateful for their patience in that moment because they had every right to be upset or to feel anything that they felt in response to that. But they just allowed me to apologize and restate what I meant, what I intend, and move forward.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
Are you in therapy or have you ever been in therapy?
I'm not currently in therapy, but I have been in therapy before.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
Well, is there anything else you think might be good for a potential client or other clinicians to know about you or polyamory, kinks, or fetishes?
Probably a wealth of things. I do try to upload like thoughts and ideas about different issues to the blog on my website, and so that's a great place to go to kind of get more insights onto my perspectives and how those perspectives may play into the working role. And so if people are looking to get more information on that, you can just go to my blog at, SeanSparksCounseling.com and dig deeper in there.
Cool. Well, thanks so much for being on the show, Sean. It was great having you.
Thanks for having me, Noah. It is really good to see you.
Yeah, same here.
The next question. The next question. The next question. The next question.
Thank you for listening to Next Quest podcast. I learned something new today, and I hope you did too. Next week's episode will feature Scott Kampschaefer, licensed clinical social worker, who will be speaking about his practice in an area of specialty, addiction. Next Quest podcast is sponsored by Jan Dimmitt Resources. Save yourself the time and stress of credentialing and let the experts at Jan Dimmitt Resources do what they do best. For over 20 years, Jan Dimmitt Resources has provided administrative support and credentialing services to mental health professionals in Texas and beyond. Visit their website at jandimmitt.com. That is JANDIMMITT.com, or call 512-731-5725 for more information on all the ways they can make running your practice easier for you. Next Quest podcasts rely solely on donations to keep this project going. Please consider becoming a patron on my Patreon page at www.patreon, that's patreon.com/nextquestpodcast, or you can make a one-time donation on my website at www.nextquestcounseling.com facebook.com/About Next Quest Podcast. You can also support the podcast by liking our Facebook page. Until next question, this is Noah Garcia signing off.